Good evening. This is London calling. I hope you're well today. I'm very well. I've just been for a run and had a shower, so my hair, my face is a little wet, but I wanted to go ahead and do this video as soon as possible. Today I thought we would read the second chapter of Bonjour Tristesse. I'll be honest with you, I've read slightly ahead this time. With chapter 1, I was reading it completely blind. And I've actually been reading it. So I think I've read up to chapter 6 or 7 at the moment. But I thought we could go back to chapter 2 because we've not read it together yet. I'm quite enjoying it. It's a good book. I've got a few different things in today's video. I've got a new light to the right hand side of me. I want to see what that looks like. I'm not quite sure what the colour temperature of the video will be like, whether my skin looks the wrong shade. And I've put my microphone in a different place. I used to have it sort of above my camera, and I put it here, so it's slightly below the screen now, to try and minimise the noise that I was getting in the videos. I think it was partly because it was near the camera, so it was probably picking up some of the camera sound. But I also think that because it was further away from my face, the noise floor was a bit higher, which is sort of the noise that is made by the microphone when no noise is being made. So hopefully with it being a bit closer, the noise floor should be less. But we'll see. It's all a learning curve. It's all an experiment. I can hear the light to the right of me making a bit of noise. And I've got this fancy app. I've got this fancy app that means I can change. I think I can change on here how loud it is. Maybe I can't. I thought I could. I thought I could change it on the app. But perhaps not. I'm sure I can. I'm sure that I can. Let's have a little look. Oh, here we go. Fan mode. Let's put it on. Smart. Okay. I've been able to change it on my phone, but it's not made much of a difference. So we'll see. Hopefully it's not too noisy. Okay. Let's find where we were in the book. I must remember that I'm reading chapter 6 at the moment, because we're going to go back to chapter 2. What I quite like about this book is the book itself is quite short, and the chapters are only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pages this chapter. So it's not too long, each chapter, which is nice, I think. Okay. There's not really a way for me to... Okay, we'll try that. Put the book there. So last time we met Cecile, Elsa, and Cecile's father. And her father had announced that a woman named Anne was coming to stay with them in their holiday villa in the south of France. So, let's find out what's going to happen. Here we go. Anne was not due for another week, and I made the most of these last days of real freedom. We had rented the villa for 2 months, but I knew that once she had come, it would be impossible for any of us to relax completely. Anne gave a shape to things and a meaning to words that my father and I preferred to ignore. She set a standard of good taste and fastidiousness which one could not help noticing in her sudden withdrawals, her expressions, and her pained silences. It was both stimulating and exhausting, but in the long run, humiliating, because I could not help feeling that she was right. On the day of her arrival, we decided that my father and Elsa should meet her at the station in... I don't know how to say that. F-R-E with an accent, J-U-S. Fréjus. I'm going to go with that. I'm sure that's wrong. I absolutely refused to go with them. In desperation, my father cut all the gladioli in the garden to offer her as soon as she got off the train. My only advice to him was not to allow Elsa to carry the bouquet. After they had left, I went down to the beach. It was 3 o'clock and the heat was overpowering. I was lying on the sand, half asleep, when I heard Cyril's voice. I opened my eyes. The sky was white, shimmering with heat. I made no reply, because I did not want to speak to him, nor to anyone. I was nailed to the sound by all the forces of the summer. "Are you dead?" he said. "From over there you look as if you'd been washed up by the sea." I smiled. He sat down near me, and my heart began to beat faster because his hand had just touched my shoulder. A dozen times during the past week, my brilliant seamanship had precipitated us into the water, our arms entwined, and I had not felt the least twinge of excitement. But today, the heat, my half-sleep, and an inadvertent movement had somehow broken down my defences. We looked at each other. I was getting to know him better. He was steady, and more restrained than is perhaps usual for his age. For this reason, our circumstances, our unusual trio, shocked him. He was too kind or too timid to tell me, but I felt it in the oblique looks of recrimination he gave my father. He would have liked to know that I was tormented by our situation, but I was not. In fact, my only torment at the moment was the way my heart was thumping. He bent over me. I thought of the past few days, of my feeling of peace and confidence when I was with him, and I regretted the approach of that wide and rather full mouth. "Cyril," I asked, "we were so happy." He kissed me gently. I looked at the sky, then saw nothing but lights bursting under my closed eyelids. The warmth, dizziness, and the taste of our first kisses continued for long moments. The sound of a motor horn separated us like thieves. I left Cyril without a word and went up to the house. I was surprised by their quick return. Anne's train could hardly have arrived yet. Nevertheless, I found her on the terrace just getting out of a car. "This is like the house of the Sleeping Beauty," she said. "How brown you are, Cecile. I am so pleased to see you." "I too," I answered. "But have you just come from Paris?" "I preferred to drive down, and by the way, I'm worn out." I showed her to her room and opened the window in hope of seeing Cyril's boat, but it had disappeared. Anne sat down on the bed. I noticed little shadows round her eyes. "What a delightful villa," she said. "Where's the master of the house?" "He's gone to meet you at the station with Elsa." I'd put her suitcase on a chair, and when I turned round I received a shock. Her face had suddenly collapsed. Her mouth was trembling. "Elsa Mackenborg? He brought Elsa Mackenborg here?" I could not think of anything to reply. I looked at her, absolutely stupefied. Was that really the face I had always seen so calm and controlled? She stared at me, but I saw she was contemplating my words. When at last she noticed me, she turned her head away. "I ought to have let you know sooner," she said, "but I was in such a hurry to get away and so tired." "And now?" I continued mechanically. "Now what?" she said. Her expression was interrogatory, disdainful, as though nothing had taken place. "Well, now you've arrived," I said stupidly, rubbing my hands together. "You can't think how pleased I am that you're here. I'll wait for you downstairs. If you'd like anything to drink, the bar is very well stocked." Talking incoherently, I left the room and went downstairs with my thoughts in turmoil. What was the reason for that expression, that worried voice, that sudden despondency? I sat on the sofa and closed my eyes. I tried to remember Anne's various faces, hard, reassuring, her expressions of irony, ease, authority. I found myself both moved and irritated by the discovery that she was vulnerable. Was she in love with my father? Was it possible for her to be in love? He was not at all her type. He was weak, frivolous, and sometimes unreliable. Perhaps it was only the fatigue of the journey, or moral indignation. I spent an hour in vain conjecture. At 5 o'clock, my father arrived with Elsa. I watched him getting out of the car. I wondered if Anne could ever love him. He walked quickly towards me, his head tilted a little backwards. He smiled. Of course, it was quite possible for Anne to love him, for anyone to love him. Anne wasn't there. He called to me. "I hope she hasn't fallen out of the train." "She's in her room," I said. "She came in her car." "No? Splendid. Then all you have to do is take up the bouquet." "Did you buy me some flowers?" called Anne's voice. "How sweet of you." She came down the stairs to meet him, cool, smiling, in a dress that did not seem to have travelled. I reflected sadly how she had appeared only when she heard the car, and that she might have done a little sooner to talk to me, even if it had been about my examination, in which, by the way, I had failed. This last thought consoled me. My father rushed up to her and kissed her hand. "I spent a quarter of an hour at the station platform holding this bunch of flowers and feeling utterly foolish. Thank goodness you're here. Did you know Elsa Mackenborg?" I averted my eyes. "We must have met," said Anne, all amiability. "What a lovely room I have. It was most kind of you to invite me, Raymond. I was feeling very exhausted." My father gave a snort of pleasure. In his eyes, everything was going well. He made conversation, uncorked bottles, but I kept thinking, first of Cyril's passionate face, and then of Anne's, both with the stamp of violence on them, and I wondered if the holidays would be as uncomplicated as my father had predicted. The first dinner was very gay. My father and Anne talked of the friends they had in common, who were few but highly colourful. I was enjoying myself up to the moment when Anne declared that my father's business partner was an idiot. He was a man who drank a lot, but I liked him very much, and my father and I had memorable meals in his company. "But Anne," I protested, "Lombard is most amusing, but he can be very funny." "All the same, you must admit that he's somewhat lacking, and as for his brand of humour, he has perhaps not a very brilliant form of intelligence, but—" She interrupted me with an air of condescension. Condescension? Condescension. You don't hear that word very often, do you? of that form of condescending. She interrupted me with an air of condescension. What you call forms of intelligence are only degrees. I was delighted with her clear-cut definition. Certain phrases fascinate me with their subtle implications, even though I may not always understand their meaning. I told Anne that I wished I could have written it down in my notebook. My father burst out laughing. At least you bear no resentment. How could I when Anne was not malevolent? I felt that she was too completely indifferent. Her judgments had not the precision, the sharp edge of spite, and so were all the more effective. The first evening, Anne did not seem to notice that Elsa was quite openly into my father's bedroom. She had brought me a jersey from her collection, but would not accept any thanks. It only bored her to be thanked, she said, and as I was anyhow shy of expressing enthusiasm, I was most relieved. I think Elsa is very nice, she remarked, as I was about to leave the room. She looked straight at me without a smile, seeking something in me which at all cost she wished to eradicate. I was to forget her earlier reaction. Oh, yes, she's a charming girl, very, sympathetique. Sympathique? Gosh, I'm so bad at languages. Very sympathique, I stammered. She began to laugh, and I went up to bed, most upset. I fell asleep thinking of Cyril, probably dancing in Cannes with girls. In Cannes, rather. I realised that I had forgotten an important factor, the presence of the sea with its incessant rhythm. Neither have I remembered the 4 lime trees in the courtyard of a school in Provence, and their scent, and my father's smile on the station platform 3 years ago when I left school, his embarrassed smile because I had plaits and wore an ugly dark dress, and then in the car his sudden triumphant joy because I had his eyes, his mouth, and I was going to be for him the dearest, most marvellous of toys. I knew nothing. He was going to show me Paris, luxury, the easy life. I dare say I owed most of my pleasures of that time to money, the pleasure of driving fast, of having a new dress, buying records, books, flowers. Even now I am not ashamed of indulging in these pleasures. In fact, I just take them for granted. I would rather deny myself my moods of mysticism or despair than give them up. My love of pleasure seems to be the only coherent side of my character. Perhaps it is because I have not read enough. At school, one only reads edifying works. In Paris, there was no time for reading. After lectures, my friends hurried me off to cinemas. They were surprised to find that I did not even know the actors' names. I sat on sunny cafe terraces. I savoured the pleasure of drifting along with the crowds, of having a drink, of being with someone who looked into your eyes, holds your hand, and then leads you far away from those same crowds. We would walk slowly home. There, under a doorway, he would draw me close and embrace me. I found out how pleasant it was to be kissed. In the evenings, I grew older. I went to parties with my father. They were very mixed parties, and I was rather out of place, but I enjoyed myself, and the fact that I was so young seemed to amuse everyone. When we left, my father would drop me at our flat, and then see his friend home. I never heard him come in. I do not want to give the impression that he was vain about his affairs, but he made no effort to hide them from me, or to invent stories in order to justify the frequent presence at breakfast of a particular friend, not even if she became a member of our household, fortunately only temporarily. In any case, I would soon have discovered the nature of his relations with his guests, and probably he found it easier to be frank than to take the trouble to deceive me, and thereby lose my confidence. His only fault was to imbue me with a cynical attitude towards love which, considering my age and experience, should have meant happiness, and not only a transitory sensation. I was fond of repeating to myself sayings like Oscar Wilde's. Sin is the only note of vivid colour that persists in the modern world. I made it my own with far more conviction, I think, than if you had... I made it my own with far more conviction, I think, than if I had put it into practice. I believed that I could base my life on it. Lovely. That's the end of the chapter. So, we shall pause there today, and we will come back at some point for chapter 3. Hope you enjoyed that. I must apologise for my bad pronunciations of French words. Languages, in general, have never been my forte. Yes. Anyway, I'll see you next time. So thank you, and goodbye.